This episode will be a two-parter. John freaking Lennon. What else is there to say about this gentleman that hasn't already been said? Just hearing his very name is enough to tell you all that he has done. John Lennon, Beatle. John Lennon, musician. John Lennon, anti-war kind of guy. John Lennon, artist. Wait, what? Ah, that's right. I bet some of you didn't know he was an artist, did you? Well, obviously he was a musical artist. Surely that's no news to us. But he was also an artist. I mean, just look at this. And this. And this. Do you know any other musicians who are this talented in drawing, painting, or any other art-related activity other than music? Besides him. Well, if there are, I can't think of any offhand. Now, on to the topic at hand. When I was kind of young, like 12 or 13, I saw an article in my local newspaper about an exhibit at one of our local shopping malls. As it turns out, said art exhibit was about none other than the aforementioned John Lennon art. Oh yeah, John Lennon was coming to Houston. Well, not really John Lennon himself, per se. That would have been big news. No, I'm talking about John Lennon's art. At that time, I was something of a self-labeled connoisseur of the arts. To some extent, I still am, but that could just be my ego talking. Anyway, I went to the art exhibit, and I was kind of at a loss for words. I literally didn't know what to say, what to think, what to feel. I wanted to touch his art. I wanted to feel if it was real, even if it wasn't, even if it was just printed on the canvas with some kind of cheapo printer kind of thing. I wouldn't have cared. It was still pretty darn amazing to me. One picture that really stuck with me was a drawing called Suitors. It was a picture of a woman being proposed to by several men in masks. The woman looked really made up and artificial, and the men proposing to her looked just as fake as she. I can't remember exactly what the explanation was, but I think it was about how most women try to be something they aren't just to get the attention of flirty guys who are also acting like something they aren't. Real deep stuff. It's kind of a horrible cycle of fake love and superficiality and all sorts of bad stuff that affects so many young couples nowadays. Especially in high school. Oh, that's the worst. My only regret is that I wish I could have stayed longer, taken in more of the atmosphere, read more of what the paintings were about, or at least have gotten something better than this dinky little sticker. Looking back on it, at that time, I don't think my tiny young mind could have grasped the true meaning of John Lennon's genius. I wasn't even that big of a Beatles fan back then, and regrettably, I'm still not. But I can't deny the influence John Lennon has had on my art style as of late. His art was so simple, and yet so complicated. Something I have always wanted to try, but have only succeeded in half-assedly emulating. Now, that could be just my low self-esteem talking, or it could be some of the feedback that some of you people have left on some of my work, or it could be that I just can't draw for nothing! But I'll tell you one thing. John Lennon was a good musician and an even better artist. Jeff Smith's Bone is one of the greatest comic books of all time. That is not an exaggeration. That is not an opinion. That is a documented scientific fact. It really is one of the greatest comic books ever conceived. In an era where most comics were pretending to be Watchmen,
except for the Sandman,
Bone came out of nowhere and surprised both the comics market and comic fans alike. Although, not right off the bat. That's right, Jeff Smith's masterpiece, a veritable underdog, amongst a sea of comic book insanity, didn't sell at its first issue. This was probably due to it looking too cartoony. But to be fair, maybe Watchmen or The Dark Knight Returns or even Amazing Fantasy number 15 must have raised a few eyebrows when they were published. But look at them now! Anyway, even though it wasn't an instant hit, Mr. Smith kept putting out issues, and even after its conclusion in 2004, it continues to be one of the best-selling comics of all time. Now, around this same time, I was reading an issue of my favorite at the time gaming magazine, Electronic Gaming Monthly. Within said issue, there was a little tidbit about a new game for the Xbox called Sam & Max Freelance Police. My first thought was, wow, Sam & Max? Cool! I used to watch their cartoon show! I wonder what this game will be like! So I waited, and waited, and waited. But it never came out. After 2 years of waiting, I did some research and found out that LucasArts, the publishers of the first Sam & Max computer game, had cancelled the new Sam & Max computer game. What the? How dare you, LucasArts! How dare you axe the cleverness department of your company and keep them milking the Star Wars license until its udders turn into little blacks and lactates department of your company? I hate you forever! Anyway, the disgruntled developers who were axed from LucasArts decided to start their own development companies like Double Fine Productions and Telltale Games, which is what we will be talking about right now. Telltale Games is a video game developer that develops point-and-click adventure games. Some of the more recent hits include Tales of Monkey Island, Hector Badge of Carnage, and their latest hit, The Walking Dead. But they had a few duds as well. When they started out, for example, they weren't instant video game stars. In fact, the first thing they produced could be considered a flop by today's standard. They created a computer game based on Bone. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, but Jack, a video game based on Bone couldn't possibly be considered a flop. How could something like that exist so close to me? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, I thought the exact same thing when I was playing the Bone games. How is this a bad game? It wasn't until subsequent playthroughs that I realized its biggest asset was also its biggest problem. It tried too hard to be like the comics. It was dialogue heavy, the puzzles seemed forced, and it was just an overall bundle of mess. I hate to say that, but it's true. Just because it's an adaptation doesn't mean you can't take some creative liberties. But hey, The Walking Dead looks like it could be something big. To be fair, I haven't played it yet, but I have read some of the reviews. And I know a hit when I see it. But I have been known to be wrong.